James Carter had always believed that life could change in a heartbeat. He learned this lesson the hard way when his wife Lisa lost her battle with cancer 2 years ago. But today, watching his 4-year-old daughter Sophie skip beside him through the bustling Saturday morning farmer's market, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. The Central Park farmer's market was alive with energy. Vendors called out their prices. Children laughed as they chased each other between the stalls, and the smell of fresh bread mixed with blooming flowers filled the crisp October air. James pulled his jacket tighter and smiled as Sophie tugged on his hand, her bright blue eyes wide with wonder at everything around them. "Daddy, look at all the colors." Sophie pointed at a display of pumpkins that ranged from deep orange to pale yellow. Her blonde curls bounced as she jumped up and down with excitement. James chuckled and lifted her up so she could see better. At 34, he had built a software company from nothing and was now worth more than he had ever dreamed possible. But holding his daughter in his arms was worth more than all the money in the world. "Mom used to love coming here," he said softly, more to himself than to Sophie. Lisa had been the one who discovered this farmer's market. Every Saturday morning she would wake up early, make pancakes, and drag James and baby Sophie here to buy fresh vegetables and flowers. Even when she was sick, even during chemotherapy, she insisted they keep this tradition alive. "I know. Daddy, you tell me every time," Sophie said with the matter-of-fact tone that only a 4-year-old could manage. "Can we get apples? The red ones?" James laughed. His daughter had no filter, and sometimes her honesty caught him off guard. But it also reminded him that children are incredibly resilient. Sophie had adapted to life without her mother better than he had in many ways. They walked toward the apple vendor, Sophie now walking beside him but keeping a tight grip on his hand. The market was more crowded than usual, probably because of the perfect fall weather. Families everywhere were enjoying the weekend, and James felt grateful that he could give Sophie these normal experiences. The past 2 years had been the hardest of his life. After Lisa died, James had seriously considered selling his company and moving somewhere quiet where he could focus entirely on raising Sophie. But his business partners convinced him to stay, and his work had actually become a welcome distraction from his grief. Building his software company had consumed most of his 20s, but now it practically ran itself. He had good people in place, which meant he could work from home most days and be present for Sophie. He made her breakfast every morning, walked her to preschool, and picked her up every afternoon. They had developed their own little routines and inside jokes. "Daddy, balloons." Sophie suddenly let go of his hand and pointed toward a vendor selling colorful helium balloons shaped like animals. "Sophie, wait," James called, but she was already weaving through the crowd toward the balloon stand. He followed quickly, catching up to her just as she stopped in front of the display. The vendor, an older man with a kind smile, was tying ribbons to a bunch of balloon animals. "Can I have the elephant one, Daddy? Please?" Sophie looked up at him with those blue eyes that were exactly like Lisa's. "Of course, sweetheart." James reached for his wallet while keeping one hand on Sophie's shoulder. The balloon vendor handed Sophie a gray elephant balloon, and she hugged it like it was a real pet. "Thank you. What's his name?" "That's up to you to decide," the man said with a wink. Sophie thought seriously for a moment. "His name is Peanut." James paid for the balloon and was about to suggest they continue shopping when Sophie spotted something else that caught her attention. "Daddy, look. That lady has cookies that look like flowers." Before James could respond, Sophie was off again, this time toward a bakery stand about 20 feet away. The crowd was thick, and James lost sight of her blonde curls for a moment. A small panic shot through his chest, but he pushed it down. The market wasn't that big, and Sophie was just excited. He made his way toward the bakery stand, scanning the crowd for her bright pink jacket. But when he reached the counter, Sophie wasn't there. "Excuse me," he said to the baker. "Did you see a little girl with blonde curls? She was wearing a pink jacket?" The woman shook her head. "Sorry, there have been so many children here today." James felt his heart rate increase slightly, but he told himself to stay calm. Sophie had probably just wandered to another nearby stand. He walked in a small circle, checking each vendor booth carefully. "Sophie," he called out, his voice carrying over the market noise. "Sophie, where are you?" A few people turned to look at him, but no little girl with blonde curls and a pink jacket appeared. The calm Saturday morning suddenly felt different. The cheerful market sound seemed louder and more chaotic. The crowd that had felt friendly and welcoming now felt overwhelming and dangerous. James pulled out his phone and started walking faster, calling Sophie's name more urgently. He approached the organic vegetable stand where he had originally planned to buy apples. "Have you seen a little girl about 4 years old? Blonde hair, pink jacket?" he asked the vendor. "No, sorry, man. But I'll keep an eye out," the vendor replied, already looking concerned. James's businessman mind, trained to solve problems quickly and efficiently, kicked into overdrive. He started thinking logically about the situation. Sophie had been right beside him just minutes ago. She couldn't have gone far. The market had boundaries, and there were only so many directions she could have walked. But as he searched each aisle of vendors with growing desperation, the logical part of his brain started competing with the terrified father part. Sophie was only 4 years old. She didn't know not to talk to strangers. She didn't understand that the world could be dangerous. The success that had defined his adult life, the company he had built, the money he had earned, none of it mattered now. The only thing that mattered was finding his daughter. The only piece of Lisa he had left in this world was somewhere in this crowd, and he couldn't see her. James realized that in less than 5 minutes, his perfect Saturday morning had turned into every parent's worst nightmare. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought began to form. What if this time life didn't just change in a heartbeat? What if this time it shattered completely? James felt his chest tighten as he called out Sophie's name again, louder this time. His voice cracked slightly and he cleared his throat, trying to maintain control. But deep down, something cold and terrible was starting to spread through his body. "Sophie, Sophie, where are you, sweetheart?" The organic vegetable vendor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stepped out from behind her stand. "Sir, when did you last see her?" "Just a few minutes ago. She was right here, looking at the flour cookies." James pointed toward the bakery stand, his hand shaking slightly. "She had a pink jacket and blonde curls. She's carrying a gray elephant balloon." "I'll help you look," the woman said immediately. "My name's Patricia. Let me ask the other vendors if they've seen her." James nodded gratefully, but his mind was already racing ahead to darker possibilities. In his business world, he was used to controlling situations, finding solutions, making things happen. But this felt completely different. This felt like falling. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, his fingers fumbling with the numbers. "1. What's your emergency? My daughter is missing. She's 4 years old at the Central Park Farmers Market. She was just here and now I can't find her anywhere. Sir, I'm going to need you to stay calm and give me some details." "Stay calm." James almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. How could anyone stay calm when their child had vanished into thin air? While he spoke to the dispatcher, he kept walking, his eyes scanning every face in the crowd. A businessman in him noted how many people were here today, how easy it would be for a small child to get lost or for someone with bad intentions to blend in. "The officers are on their way, sir. Can you describe what your daughter was wearing?" James rattled off Sophie's description, his voice getting steadier as he focused on the practical details. Pink jacket with white stripes, blue jeans with a small heart patch on the knee, white sneakers with glitter laces that she had picked out herself, blonde curly hair and 2 small ponytails, blue eyes, about 3.5 feet tall. As he hung up, Patricia returned with 2 other vendors in tow. "We've asked everyone in this section," she said. "Nobody's seen her in the last few minutes, but Maria here saw a little girl with a balloon heading toward the north end of the market about 10 minutes ago." 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, Sophie could have walked to the street. She could have left the market entirely. James felt his breathing become shallow. "Thank you," he managed to say. "I'll check that direction." He started jogging toward the north end of the market, pushing politely through the crowd. Other shoppers stepped aside when they saw the panic in his eyes. Some asked if everything was okay, and James found himself explaining the situation over and over again. 4 years old, blonde curls, pink jacket, elephant balloon. Word spread quickly through the market. James watched as complete strangers began looking around, calling Sophie's name, checking behind vendor stalls and under tables. The community response was overwhelming, but it also made the situation feel more real and more terrifying. A young couple with a toddler approached him. "We saw a little girl with a balloon about 15 minutes ago," the woman said. "She was near the flower stand on the east side, but I don't remember seeing a pink jacket." James thanked them and changed direction, his heart pounding as he jogged toward the flower vendor. 15 minutes. How long had he actually been searching? Time felt distorted, like he was moving through water. His phone rang and he saw his assistant Rebecca's name on the screen. He had programmed her number to always reach him even on weekends. "Rebecca, I need help. Sophie is missing at the Central Park Farmers Market. Can you coordinate with the police and maybe get some of our security team down here?" "Oh my God, James, yes, absolutely. I'm calling our security contractor right now. Do you want me to come down there?" "Yes, please. And Rebecca, can you also call that private investigator we used for the company background checks? The one with the connections to law enforcement?" "Already on it. I'll be there in 20 minutes. James hung up and kept searching. 2 police officers had arrived and were taking statements from vendors and shoppers. One of them, a young officer named Martinez, approached James. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to need a recent photo of your daughter." James pulled out his phone and scrolled through pictures until he found one from yesterday. Sophie grinning at the camera. Her elephant balloon from today's adventure nowhere to be seen because it hadn't happened yet. Had it really been just yesterday that everything was normal? "We're going to send this out to all units in the area," Officer Martinez said. "We're also going to check the park's security cameras. The good news is that the market has defined boundaries and we have officers at all the exit points now." Exit points. The words hit James like a physical blow. The idea that Sophie might have left the market, might be somewhere in the vast city beyond, was almost unbearable. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Security team arriving in 5 minutes. PI on the way. Hang in there." James looked at his watch. 20 minutes had passed since he'd last seen Sophie. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. In his business, 20 minutes was nothing. A short meeting. A coffee break. But now, 20 minutes felt like an eternity of terror. A grandmother with gray hair grabbed his arm gently. "Honey, I've been watching the news for 40 years, and I can tell you that in situations like this, children almost always turn up safe. They get distracted by something interesting and wander off, but they're usually found within an hour." James wanted to believe her, but his mind kept going to all the terrible stories he'd tried never to think about when Sophie was safe at home. Missing children who never came home, families destroyed in a single moment of inattention. He thought about Lisa and how she would have handled this situation. She would have been terrified too, but she would have stayed focused. She would have been practical and hopeful at the same time. She would have reminded him that Sophie was smart and brave, even at 4 years old. But Lisa wasn't here. Lisa had been gone for 2 years, and Sophie was all he had left of their family. If something happened to Sophie, James wasn't sure he could survive it. The thought of going home to their empty apartment, of Sophie's toys sitting unused, of never hearing her laugh again made him feel sick. He forced himself to keep moving, to keep searching, to keep hoping. 3 security guards in dark suits appeared and introduced themselves as Rebecca's team. They spread out efficiently, each taking a different section of the market. "We're going to find her, Mr. Carter," one of them said with professional confidence. James nodded, but inside he was falling apart. He was a successful businessman who could solve complex problems and make million-dollar decisions, but he couldn't find his 4-year-old daughter in a farmer's market. He had never felt so helpless in his entire life. As he walked toward the lake area of the park, still calling Sophie's name, James made a silent promise to whatever force in the universe might be listening. If Sophie came home safe, he would never take a single moment with her for granted again. James had been searching for 35 minutes when he decided to check the lake area one more time. His legs felt heavy, and his voice was getting hoarse from calling Sophie's name. The police had set up a command center near the market entrance, and volunteers were still searching every corner of the park. But so far, nothing. He walked down the winding path toward the lake, past families having picnics and couples taking weekend strolls. The normal Saturday activities felt surreal to him now. How could people be laughing and enjoying themselves when his world was falling apart? The lake came into view, its surface reflecting the afternoon sunlight. James had walked this path 100 times with Lisa and Sophie. They used to feed the ducks here, and Sophie would giggle when the birds fought over pieces of bread. Today the memory felt like a knife in his chest. He was about to turn back when something caught his eye near the far end of the lake. There, sitting on a weathered wooden bench about 200 yards away, was a figure holding what looked like a small child. James's heart stopped. Even from this distance, he could see blonde curls catching the sunlight, The child was wearing something pink. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment he couldn't move. Was it possible? Could it really be Sophie? He started walking faster, then jogging, then running. His dress shoes weren't made for running on park paths, but he didn't care. As he got closer, he could see more clearly. It was definitely a child, and the woman holding her looked elderly, maybe in her 70s. "Sophie," he called out, his voice carrying across the water. The woman on the bench looked up, and James could see her face now. She had silver gray hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing a faded blue coat that looked like it had been well loved for many years. Her face was kind, with deep laugh lines around her eyes, and in her arms, calm and peaceful, was Sophie. James ran harder than he had ever run in his life. His lungs burned, and his heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears. Relief and panic mixed together in his chest. Sophie was alive, she was okay, but who was this stranger holding his daughter? "Sophie, Sophie, Daddy's here." As he got within 50 yards of the bench, Sophie looked up and saw him. Her face broke into a huge smile, and she waved at him with her free hand. She was still holding the gray elephant balloon. "Daddy, look, I found a nice lady." The woman stood up slowly, carefully supporting Sophie in her arms. She didn't look alarmed or surprised to see James running toward them. Instead, she smiled gently as if she had been expecting him. James reached them, breathing hard and sweating despite the cool October air. Up close, he could see that the woman's eyes were a warm brown color, and there was something strangely familiar about her face, though he was certain he had never seen her before. "Thank God," he gasped, reaching out for Sophie. "Thank God you're okay." The woman handed Sophie to him without hesitation, and James hugged his daughter so tightly that she squeaked. "Daddy, you're squishing me." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I was so scared. I couldn't find you anywhere." James's voice was shaky, and he realized he was close to tears. He held Sophie back so he could look at her face. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Daddy. The nice lady took care of me. She knew I was lost, and she said she would wait here until you found us." James looked at the elderly woman who was watching their reunion with a peaceful expression. Now that the immediate relief was wearing off, questions started forming in his mind. Who was this woman? How had she found Sophie? Why had she brought her to this specific bench instead of taking her to the police or back to the market? "Thank you," he said, his voice still unsteady. "Thank you so much for taking care of her. I don't know how to repay you. My name is James Carter, and this is Sophie." "I know who you are," the woman said softly. Her voice had a gentle quality that immediately put James at ease, even though her words were puzzling. "You know who I am?" James asked, confused. "I'm sorry, have we met before?" The woman smiled, and again James had that strange feeling of familiarity, like trying to remember a dream after waking up. "In a way," she said. "I've been watching over Sophie since she wandered away from the market. She wasn't scared at all. She's a very brave little girl. I saw the balloons and wanted to follow them," Sophie explained, snuggling against James's chest. "But then I got mixed up about which way to go back. The nice lady found me and said we should wait here because this was your special place." "Special place?" James repeated, looking around. "This bench, this exact spot by the lake. He and Lisa used to come here when they were dating. It was where he had proposed to her 5 years ago. After Sophie was born, they would bring her here to watch the sunset. But how could this stranger possibly know that?" "How did you know?" James started to ask, but something in the woman's eyes stopped him. They held a depth of knowledge and kindness that seemed impossible for a stranger to have. Sophie yawned and rested her head on James's shoulder. "The lady told me stories about Mommy," she said sleepily. "She said Mommy used to like feeding the ducks here." James felt his blood turn cold. Lisa had loved feeding the ducks at this lake. It was one of her favorite activities, something they had done together countless times. But Lisa had been gone for 2 years. How could this woman know about that? "What did you tell her about her mother?" James asked quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Only beautiful things," the woman replied. "Only love." The afternoon sun was starting to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lake. The woman's face was partially in shadow, making her features harder to read. But James could see that she was studying him carefully, as if she was making some kind of decision. "I should take you back to the market," James said, shifting Sophie's weight in his arms. "The police are looking for both of you. Everyone's been worried." "Of course," the woman said. But first, there's something I need to tell you." There was something in her tone that made James pause. It wasn't urgent or alarming, but it carried a weight that suggested whatever she was about to say was important. Sophie had fallen asleep in his arms, tired from her adventure. Her breathing was soft and steady against his chest, and James felt the last of his panic finally leaving his body. She was safe. She was home. But as he looked at this mysterious woman who had somehow known exactly where to bring his daughter, who had known about Lisa and the ducks and this special place, James realized that his relief was being replaced by something else entirely. Curiosity mixed with an inexplicable sense that this encounter was not random at all. That somehow this woman had been meant to find Sophie today, that she had been meant to bring her here, to this exact bench to wait for him. The woman stepped closer and James could smell a faint scent of lavender, the same perfume that Lisa used to wear. His heart started beating faster again, but this time it wasn't from panic. "What did you want to tell me?" he asked softly, not wanting to wake Sophie. The elderly woman looked at James for a long moment, her kind eyes seeming to search his face. The afternoon breeze picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees around the lake. Sophie stirred slightly in his arms but remained asleep, her small hand still clutching the elephant balloon. "Your wife was very special," the woman said quietly. "She had a way of seeing the best in people, didn't she?" James felt his throat tighten. "How did you know Lisa?" "She used to worry about you," the woman continued as if she hadn't heard his question. "She worried that you would blame yourself for things that weren't your fault. She worried that you would forget to take care of yourself while taking care of Sophie." James stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. This woman was talking about Lisa as if she had known her personally, as if they had been friends. But that was impossible. James had known all of Lisa's friends. They had been to her funeral. They still called to check on him and Sophie. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some kind of mistake," James said carefully. "I don't understand how you could know these things about my wife." The woman smiled gently. "There's no mistake, James, may I?" She gestured toward Sophie as if asking permission to touch her. James nodded, though he wasn't sure why. The woman reached out and gently brushed a curl away from Sophie's forehead, the same way Lisa used to do when Sophie was sleeping. "She's growing up to look just like her mother," the woman observed. "But she has your stubbornness." James felt goosebumps rise on his arms. That was exactly what Lisa used to say. Every time Sophie would refuse to eat her vegetables or insist on wearing her princess dress to the grocery store, Lisa would laugh and say, "She has your stubbornness, James." "Who are you?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, the woman stepped closer to him. She was shorter than Lisa had been, probably around 5 feet 4 inches, and she moved with the careful grace of someone who had lived a long life. Up close, James could see that her eyes weren't just brown. They had flecks of gold in them, just like Lisa's had. "Before I tell you what I came to say," the woman said softly, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't give up on happiness. Promise me you won't spend the rest of your life looking backward instead of forward." James felt tears starting to form in his eyes. Those were almost the exact words Lisa had said to him during one of their last conversations before she died. She had made him promise to find love again someday, to give Sophie siblings if he could, to build a full life even after she was gone. "I don't understand what's happening," James said, his voice shaking. "You will," the woman replied. She reached up and placed her hand gently on his cheek, the way Lisa used to do when she wanted to comfort him. Her hand was warm and soft, and for just a moment, James could swear he felt Lisa's presence so strongly it was like she was standing right there beside them. "Lisa wants you to know something," the woman whispered, leaning close to his ear. James's heart stopped beating. The world around them seemed to fade away. The sound of other people in the park, the traffic in the distance, even the wind in the trees. All he could hear was this woman's voice. "She wants you to know that you're doing better than you think you are. She's proud of the father you've become. She's proud of how you've honored her memory while still letting Sophie be happy." James felt tears running down his cheeks now, but he couldn't speak. The woman's voice was so gentle, so certain, as if she was simply delivering a message she had been asked to share. "And she wants you to know," the woman continued, her voice even softer now, "that Sophie's little brother is going to have her eyes." James felt the blood drain from his face. His knees nearly gave out and he had to steady himself against the back of the bench. "Little brother," Sophie didn't have a little brother, but Lisa had always wanted a son. They had been trying for another baby when she got sick. But there was something else, something that made this moment even more impossible. Hidden in Lisa's jewelry box in the back of their bedroom closet was a pregnancy test. A positive pregnancy test that James had found 3 months after the funeral, when he was finally strong enough to go through her things. The test was dated just 2 days before Lisa's cancer diagnosis. She had been pregnant when she got sick, but she had never told him. The doctor said the pregnancy had ended naturally in the very early stages, probably because of the stress and the cancer treatments. Lisa had never even known. No one else knew about that test. James had never told anyone, not the doctors, not his family, not even his closest friends. It was a secret he carried alone, a private grief on top of all the rest. "How could you possibly know about that?" James whispered, his voice breaking. The woman smiled, and for a split second James could swear her face looked different. Younger, more familiar. "Because love doesn't end, James, it just changes form." She stepped back from him, and James blinked, trying to clear his vision. When he looked at her again, she seemed to be fading somehow, becoming less solid, like a photograph left too long in the sun. "Wait," James said, reaching out with his free hand. "Please wait. I need to understand what's happening. I need to know who you are." But the woman was already walking away, moving toward the tree line at the edge of the park. She turned back once and waved, and James could see that she was smiling. "Take care of each other," she called out softly. "And don't forget to feed the ducks." James wanted to follow her, but Sophie was still sleeping in his arms, and something told him he shouldn't wake her. He watched as the woman in the blue coat walked into the shadows between the trees. He blinked, and she was gone. Not just out of sight, gone. As if she had never been there at all. James stood there by the lake, holding his sleeping daughter, trying to process what had just happened. His logical mind told him it was impossible. People didn't just disappear. Strangers didn't know intimate details about his dead wife. Dead people didn't send messages through elderly women in parks. But his heart knew something different. His heart knew that he had just experienced something that couldn't be explained by logic or reason. Sophie stirred in his arms and opened her eyes. She looked around sleepily, then up at her father. "Daddy, where did the nice lady go?" James looked around the empty area by the lake. There was no sign that anyone else had ever been there. "What nice lady, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Sophie sat up straighter in his arms and pointed toward the trees. "The lady who said she knew Mommy. She said Mommy lives in a beautiful place now where there are flowers everywhere and no one ever gets sick." James felt his chest tighten again. "What else did she tell you, Sophie?" "She said Mommy wants us to be happy. And she said—" Sophie paused, looking thoughtful. "She said that someday soon I'm going to be a big sister." James stared at his daughter, his mind reeling. In 3 weeks he was supposed to meet with an adoption agency about a newborn baby boy whose young mother had specifically requested him after reading about his foundation work with children who had lost parents to cancer. But he hadn't told Sophie about that yet. He hadn't told anyone. James walked back toward the farmer's market in a daze, carrying Sophie in his arms. She had fallen back asleep, exhausted from her adventure, and he was grateful for the quiet. He needed time to process what had just happened by the lake. As they approached the market, he could see the police cars and the small crowd that had gathered. Officer Martinez spotted them first and radioed to the other officers that Sophie had been found safe. "Mr. Carter!" Thank God. Rebecca came running toward them, her face showing relief and exhaustion. "Where was she? Who found her?" James hesitated. How could he explain what had happened? Who would believe that an elderly woman had known intimate details about his dead wife, had delivered an impossible message, and then vanished into thin air? "She was by the lake," he said simply. "A woman found her and stayed with her until I got there." "Where is this woman?" "We need to thank her and get her statement for our report," Officer Martinez said, approaching with his notepad ready. She left before I could get her information," James replied. It wasn't exactly a lie. The officer frowned slightly. "That's unusual. Most people would want to make sure everything was properly documented. Can you describe her?" James gave a basic description of the elderly woman, but he left out the strange details, the impossible knowledge, the mysterious disappearance. He could see the skeptical look on the officer's face when he admitted he didn't get her name or contact information. Well, the important thing is that Sophie is safe, Officer Martinez concluded. We'll file the report as resolved. But in the future, Mr. Carter, I'd recommend keeping a closer eye on her in crowded places. James nodded, though the advice stung a little. He had been watching Sophie carefully. Sometimes things just happened that were beyond anyone's control. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork, statements, and well-meaning advice from other parents. Word spread quickly through the market that Sophie had been found, and several vendors came by to check on them. Patricia, the woman from the vegetable stand who had helped coordinate the search, insisted on giving them a bag of fresh apples. For Sophie, she said with a warm smile, I'm so glad she's okay. By the time they got home that evening, James felt emotionally and physically drained. He made Sophie her favorite dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and listened as she chattered about her day, seemingly unfazed by the experience. The nice lady said that Mommy watches us when we sleep, Sophie said between bites of sandwich. She said Mommy is always with us even when we can't see her. James set down his spoon. What else did the lady tell you, sweetheart? She said that love is the strongest magic in the world. And she said that sometimes people who love us very much can find ways to help us even when they're far away. That night, after Sophie was asleep, James sat in his home office, staring at a folder on his desk. Inside was all the paperwork for the adoption process he had started 3 months ago. He had applied to adopt through a local agency that specialized in helping single parents. The call had come 2 weeks ago. A 17-year-old girl named Katie was pregnant and due any day. She had specifically requested James after reading about his software company's charitable foundation, which provided support for children who had lost parents to serious illnesses. Katie's own mother had died of cancer when she was 15, and she felt a connection to James's story. She wanted her baby to go to someone who understood loss but also understood hope. James had been scheduled to meet with Katie and the adoption counselors next week. But after today's encounter by the lake, the mysterious woman's words kept echoing in his mind. Sophie's little brother is going to have her eyes. He picked up his phone and called his adoption counselor, Margaret. James? Is everything okay? It's kind of late. I'm sorry to call so late, Margaret, but I was wondering, has there been any update on Katie's situation? Actually, yes. She went into labor this afternoon. The baby was born around 6 o'clock tonight. A healthy boy, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. James felt his heart skip a beat. 6 o'clock. That was right around the time he had been talking to the mysterious woman by the lake. She's been asking if you're still planning to go through with the adoption, Margaret continued. She really wants to meet you before she makes her final decision. Yes, James said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely. When can I meet them? How about tomorrow afternoon? Katie is doing well, and she's eager to see if you two are a good fit. After hanging up, James sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about the day's events. Logic told him that the timing was just a coincidence. But something deeper, something that didn't rely on logic, told him otherwise. The next afternoon, James and Sophie arrived at the hospital. Sophie was excited about the possibility of meeting a baby, though she didn't fully understand what adoption meant. She just knew that her daddy was thinking about bringing home a little brother. Katie was a thoughtful, mature young woman who reminded James a little of Lisa at that age. She was tired from giving birth, but her eyes were bright and determined. She had clearly thought through her decision carefully. I want him to have the best possible life, she explained to James as they sat in her hospital room. I want him to have a father who will love him and protect him. When I read about your foundation and how you've raised Sophie on your own, I knew you were the right person. Can I see him? James asked. Katie nodded toward the bassinet beside her bed. He's sleeping right now, but you can look. James walked over to the clear plastic bassinet and looked down at the tiny baby inside. The infant was perfectly formed, with a little tuft of dark hair and the peaceful expression that all newborn babies seem to have. Then the baby opened his eyes. James felt the world stop, spinning. The baby's eyes were the exact same striking, blue-green color as Lisa's eyes, the exact same color as Sophie's eyes. They were unmistakable, a blue so deep it looked like ocean water, with flecks of green that caught the light. James's hands started shaking, and he had to grip the edge of the bassinet to steady himself. The mysterious woman's words came flooding back. Sophie's little brother is going to have her eyes. He's beautiful, James whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Would you like to hold him? Katie asked. James nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Katie lifted the baby from the bassinet and placed him gently in James's arms. The infant looked up at him with those impossible familiar eyes, and James felt something break open in his chest. His name is Michael, Katie said softly, but you can change it if you want. James looked down at the baby, at Michael, and felt a peace he hadn't experienced since Lisa died. Somehow impossibly, everything was falling into place exactly as the mysterious woman had said it would. Michael is perfect, he said. Sophie climbed up on the hospital bed next to Katie and peered at the baby in James's arms. Daddy, he has the same eyes as me and Mommy. James met Katie's questioning look. Sophie's mother died 2 years ago. She had the same color eyes, Katie smiled. Then it's meant to be, isn't it? 3 weeks later, James sat in his living room, watching Sophie gently help him feed Michael his bottle. The adoption had been finalized and they were officially a family of 3. Daddy, Sophie said quietly, do you think the nice lady from the park knew about Michael? James looked down at his son, those familiar blue-green eyes looking back at him, and smiled. Yes, sweetheart, I think she did. Outside, the autumn wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere in the distance James could swear he smelled lavender.